you're thinking router, and you're probably thinking, hey, I know all about a router. I am a computer whiz, and I get my internets and my Wi-Fi through the router in my house. But we're talking about a different type of router. This machine is called a router table actually, and we can put all these different shaped bits in there to put all sorts of fun shapes on the edge of a board there. And you can see, you might have seen some wood with some patterns like this before, maybe some rounded over edges like so, and we're gonna see some of these here. If you're wondering where you may have seen them before, on the edge of a table, it's probably rounded off here a lot of times, or in your house, along the floorboards, you probably have some molding that has some fun shapes in it that has all been done with a router, you guessed it. Not on the Wi-Fi, in real life on this router table is where we are gonna be doing that. The blood bubble on this tool is going to be 3 inches back. Notice that is bigger than this guard that is protecting your fingers, so it's even past that. Keep your fingers out of that blood bubble. When we're using the router, a few of the most important safety rules are that we always are moving in this direction. We have some arrows in there. Always move your piece of wood in this direction. Never move your piece backwards. If you're trying to go over the same spot again, you can go wee and then take it out and then go over it again if you need to, but never go backwards. Also, you will see that the guard here is not in the correct position. We want this to be just above the piece of wood so that we have no chance of getting our hand underneath that. So we can adjust that with those 2 little knobs, put that right above our piece of wood. If it's actually sitting on your piece of wood, sometimes it gets jammed up, but now we have no chance of our fingers getting underneath that. When you use the router, you are going to want to keep your hands out of the blood bubble here. You need to keep your hands out of there at all times. So when you start this, you would probably have both hands on this side, and you want to keep this up against the fence whenever possible. And we're gonna have that lined up with the bearing. We'll see that in a moment of how we set that up. And we're gonna be pushing this through here, like so. And then eventually, I'm gonna have to jump one hand over to the other side to continue on here. And then at the end, I'm gonna have to jump my hand again to the other side and pull it the rest of the way through. Always keeping my hands out of that blood bubble. If you need to, we have rubber pads like this one here, which will help you keep your hands out of the dangerous area there. That can help you push that through if you are feeling your fingers are getting too close. When we are using the router, we should always have our piece of wood flat on the table. If your piece of wood rocks and is not flat like this piece of wood would do, you cannot do this vertically like so. You can lay this piece of wood flat and do this, and we'll see that in a little bit. But you should have this nice flat surface on the table. Setting up the router to make a cut correctly is gonna take a little bit of trial and error. That blade might need to be moved a little bit up or moved a little bit down. Mr. Gasser will help you with this, but we can adjust that very small increments, as in a very small amount, using this red dial here. And you can see right there it says up. If you go that way, it moves the router bit upwards, and if you go the other way, it moves it downwards. So instead of doing your trial runs on the actual pieces of wood that you are going to be keeping and using for your project, we want to test it out on a scrap piece of wood and make sure that the shape that you're going to be getting, the rounding off the corner or whatever that router bit is going to be doing, turns out correctly on this scrap piece of wood before doing it on your actual project. And this scrap piece of wood should be somewhat similar If you're trying to do a curve or something like that, you should have a curved test piece. If you're trying to do a straight edge like this, you should have a straight edge test piece. Before turning on the router, we want to make sure that everything is secure. There should be no loose parts on this. This blade guard should be attached. The vacuum should also be running here before we turn it on, and nothing should be loose. We don't want any loose parts on the router. So here we're going to have a little demo of how the router works. We are going to be using a roundover bit on that edge that my finger is on. And so I'm going to put that edge on the bottom up against the fence there, so it's in that bottom corner. Turning on the machine, and we're going to move the piece of wood to our left as we've spoken about. Nice and slowly at that pace there. Notice I'm always having two hands on the piece of wood, moving nice and slow, keeping my fingers out of that blood bubble as I hopped across there to the other side. And now I'm going to hop again to the other side, keeping those two hands at all times on that piece of wood. Moving out and moving out at the end there. And now you can see that is a nice rounded over corner there. Right there. If you are trying to round off or use the router on the end grain, so the grain in this piece of wood is going this way, and it's a pretty narrow space here, you are not going to want to do this because it won't be very balanced and it's going to go wham and throw this piece of wood here and not be safe. So one way to solve this problem and solve another problem here is to put a nice board like this one that's 90 degrees and has a nice long edge here, and we can hold this together here as we push this through the router. That is going to do two things. That's going to stabilize this piece as you cut that and round off or route that corner of the piece of wood. But this is also going to stop this wood from splintering here on the edge. Sometimes when you get to the edge of the end grain here, it will split that off because the blade is going in this direction. So that second piece of wood is going to support that. Much like when you're drilling a hole, you'd have another piece of wood behind it. So let's see that in action. Here we have the end of this block. I'm putting in there. Notice everything is nice and square. We got everything, it has straight edges on it. No pieces here are cut on the scroll saw. That would not be what we want to use. And we're moving this together. I'm kind of squeezing the two boards together as I go, keeping my hands clear. There should be no gaps between those two boards. And you can see that worked pretty well. We have a little bit of tear out, that little piece right there. But overall, that turns out a lot better than it would otherwise without that scrap piece of wood.